What's up, guys? My name is Lex Veldhuis and welcome to a brand new segment called Poker Coaching. We're gonna look at really interesting stream situations where I wasn't exactly sure about my strategy. The first hand immediately is from a $320 bounty builder final table. We're gonna take a look at the hand and then immediately hear what my poker coach Jordan Drummond, aka BBC Poker, has to say about it. Enjoy. I followed the aces on that Jack 9-8 King. Okay. I'm just gonna barrel, you know, that's fuck it. I really think that I put a lot of stress on a lot of his pocket pairs, but also ace queen is in there, obviously. Yeah, he can have a jack, that's true, but I blocked two really good jack combinations. You know, king jack suited, king 10 suited. I mean, I think I have the pure, not low. Let's see, what hands do I get rid of? Sixes, sevens, nines, tens. Ace queen is not in there anymore, so the queen is actually really good for me, I think. You could consider folding some jack X for sure. You can have some fives and fours or something, sure, eights, but I mean, tons of hands that I miss as well. Yeah, I mean, I have the fucking pure not low as well, so unblock nines, which is great. Okay. Yeah, I'm cool with it. I think it's fine. I mean, it's not the result I wanted, obviously. Let's be fucking real about that, but I think I wanna barrel there.
All right, let's just jump straight in. All right, so we get the EP open, we 3-bet. What are your thoughts here, Lex, as far as combo selection? How are you thinking about this?
I kind of like, especially, I mean, I want to go heavily towards, when 3-betting the chip leader at the final table, I want to go heavy towards the ace-x, king-x combos because I want to block the strongest combos possible from their open. I think king 10 is a good hand regardless, you know, it's already qualifies in terms of playability, hand strength. With the other stacks behind, I think it's good to immediately 3-bet because I don't think it's a spot where people behind are going to attack us because it's like chip leader opening, second in chips flatting. I mean, this is not the most tasty spot for the small blind to just 3-bet or rip it in or something. So I think that with my strong hands, I would be 3-betting here as well. So I would go towards mainly, you know, I would have a reasonable 3-bet strategy, and I think this hand just qualifies for it. It's also six-handed. He has a pretty significant chip lead. There's a 20-30 big blind stack, so I think that he could open quite liberally in that sense. So I just felt like a good moment to attack.
Okay, this is a totally reasonable pre-flop line. The caveat is that there is some interesting strategy that emerges when we get to final tables here, and it typically involves flatting more of like the king 10 suited, king jack suited, king queen suited. Basically flatting more of the what we would call like almost like the linear parts of the range, like from the top down. And you typically 3-bet almost in a more polarized way. So you see a lot of 3-betting here with hands like king 6 of clubs, king 5 of clubs, king 7 of clubs, king 4 of clubs, as well as basically flatting hands like ace 10 suited, ace 9 suited, ace 8 suited, or ace jack suited, and 3-betting more with like ace 2, ace 3, ace 4. Basically just 3-betting with more of a polarized range because you're 3-betting so strong here. Your value 3-bets are very narrow. So you're not really 3-betting here with jacks. You're not really 3-betting here with 10s. And so you typically end up with like maybe a slightly more polarized 3-bet here, and you end up calling with a lot of hands that kind of look like this one, but this is still reasonable. This hand may mix, so it's a reasonable played hand, but you may end up calling here more often and 3-betting more with the combos I just mentioned. So you 3-bet, which is reasonable.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking about it way too linearly. I was just like, this is almost more like a sort of like chip EV beginning of the tournament 3-bet.
Exactly, sure.
Yeah, I see what you're saying because because I sort of forgot about the fact that I would probably be flatting jacks and 10s here just because of the ICM and pay jump implications, and then as soon as those hands aren't in, it's just if I'm 3-betting this hand, it means that my 3-betting range is going to be way too weak.
Yeah, I mean, it's also the case, like I said, this hand can flat. So you can take advantage of the fact that this hand is capable of calling by 3-betting hands that really aren't capable of calling. I mean, if you have king 4 suited here, you can't call, right? But it still has a lot of the same properties. You know,
Okay.
the king high blocker relative to this player's range, which is really valuable to you. And yeah, it's just it's a lot of players don't know that that's how it works. So you know, I don't fault you for not knowing that. But yeah, this hand probably calls a lot, and the way you should attack is probably with king 4 or king 5 suited.
Okay.
We get to the flop, and you do generally see more mixing in these types of scenarios. There tends to be more checking because the types of flops you hit are fairly transparent. So because you 3-bet the way that I suggested, um, you end up having very little Jack X in your 3-bet range. You don't 3-bet much in the way of, you know, Jack 5 suited. King 5 suited is okay because of the block orientation in your range. Jack 5 suited is not. So you're not going to have King Jack suited. You're not going to have Queen Jack suited. You're not going to have King Jack offsuit. You're not going to have Ace Jack suited or Ace Jack offsuit. You're not going to have, so you can end up checking in some of these scenarios more than you might expect, just because you just don't have pot fives, you don't have fours. You just don't have any interaction on this board. Basically, the situation is such that like you have aces or bust,
Mm.
and that's a kind of, that can be somewhat of a somewhat complicated thing to navigate, particularly when the guy covers you and you're quite deep. So you do see sometimes more passive play on the boards that you know you have no interaction with. It's quite different if the board was king high. If the board was ace high, you typically end up doing a lot of betting on those boards because your bluffs interact with the board quite nicely. But on these boards, it's just not the case. So you do see some checking that can be a little bit surprising.
Yeah.
But you know, in chips, this would obviously be a pure bet, so I'd expect you to bet.
Yeah, because that's kind of the way I'm going through the hand almost, right? Like it's almost predictable. Like, oh, I'm playing I'm almost playing like a chippy V hand. I didn't, obviously it's a compounding mistake where I don't realize the range, and therefore I think this board is a bet, and it's not. But it's very interesting because I see this board, I'm like, okay, well, they don't have top of their range or whatever, maybe aces, but they don't have anything else. They don't have overpairs, and yeah, I mean, I might have ace. I would probably, even with what you said before, I probably still kind of think ace jack offsuit could be a cool sort of 3-bet bluff
Mhm. Mhm.
pre. But I mean, that's about it, right? I mean, the fact that I don't have the nuts, I don't 3-bet jacks there, so that leaves me just a bunch of overpairs and a whole bunch of misses.
Yeah, and you don't have as many overpairs as you'd like. You should probably flat queens here, which is something that maybe you're not doing either. But yeah, this particular scenario is a very narrow 3-bet range for you on the value side. It's aces, kings, and ace king, and that's the end of the story. So and yeah, ace jack will, shouldn't make it into the 3-bet range because you just don't have enough value bets to support. Too many combos, and as I mentioned, the way that I do it is the way that I recommended doing it is the way that you should probably try to stick to. A lot of, like I said, king 5 suited, king 4, king 3, king 2, ace 2, ace 3, ace 4, ace 5, maybe some suited ace 7s and ace 8s because those are difficult to flat. And then once it gets like ace 9, you probably just want to call.
Yeah.
So yeah, we just don't hit this flop, and you can still bet. I mean, it's not like it's stupid, but you just have to be cognizant of the fact that you can't just bet all of your air all the time because you just don't have enough value bets to support that. So there's going to be some checking and things like that as well. So you bet. That's okay. It's not stupid or anything. You get check called, and you're gonna have, again, if you have the properly constructed range, you're gonna have a bunch of gut shots here. Like you're gonna have king 6 and king 7 and things. Ace 6, ace 7 suited. So this hand's close. Again, in chips, this would be a pure barrel. So I'm not surprised to see this. Here, it's close. It's not like a disastrous line. It's close. But your hands like pocket aces and pocket kings. That's, like I said, that's all you've got. And even those hands aren't looking like phenomenal. When you think about it, because you're not trying to thinly invest stacks against, with this player here, right? You want to have like massive edges when you get it in. And if you bet the turn and jam the river and you have aces, it's fine, but it's just a little on the thin side. Right? So
Yeah, I figured also because I have sort of like king high, I did feel like there would be some ace queen, maybe some king queen calls on the flop, especially versus like whatever 25% bet, whatever it was, 28
sure.
or yeah, 25. So it's 25% on the flop. So I figured he'd have some maybe some dominating kings, ace highs that are still in, or like a hand like ace 10 of diamonds or something. So I kind of figured with the turn barrel, I'm just gonna get all of those out. Maybe he has ace 5 suited, you know, even though he could also jam that pre-flop, but maybe he does have something like that. Yeah, I mean, the eight's just not great either. Like he's never folding sixes and sevens here.
Yeah, the eight's a little bit of an intimidating card. It's definitely not the card you would have asked for, right? So that's that's all. It's not a perfect card. Um, your opponent may your opponent's a chip leader. Your opponent may have a hand like pocket eight still. It's not super likely. You're right that ace five suited is more of a four bet. This players are not supposed to call that often. This player's supposed to play a heavy four bet strategy pre-flop. Most players mess that up. Case in point, this player called. The four bet to call ratio is something like 8-1. I mean, this player's supposed to four bet about 8 times as often as they call pre-flop. So as soon as this player calls here, they probably don't know too much about what's going on with how this spot's supposed to work. Yeah, and so this is reasonable, but still close. Get to the river, and again, from my perspective, it's just like even if we have aces, it's across this run out, it's fine, but it's fairly intimidating. I mean, all of the value, all of the EV is going to basically be a derivative of, I guess, like ace jack suited. We're hoping to get called by. I mean, I would assume like king jack probably folds a bunch. Queen jack we now lose to. So jack 10 and jack 9 don't have to call this river, I don't think. You don't have 10-9, so I don't think that they have to think about that in terms of blocking effects. It just doesn't matter. I think it's more relevant for this player to have ace jack, block aces, potentially have king jack, block kings. So I don't think jack 10 and jack 9 are very good hero calls when you don't have 10-9.
Yeah,
But,
I don't know. I kind of feel like it's a little bit like, oh yeah, on the flop, okay, I hope they have ace high. On the turn, I hope they fold ace high, and then the river is a queen. And then I'm like, even though I'm talking about like ace queen king queen on the river, I'm like, oh, I hope he has sixes or sevens.
Sure.
You know, I don't know. It does seem like watching the hand back a bit. It does seem like I'm drowning a little bit in this scenario. I mean, there's some bluffs that get there. Maybe like I mean, you mentioned like queen 10, but maybe like a queen 9 suited or something. You know?
Yeah, maybe for you the main bluff that'll fail will probably be ace queen.
Okay.
I mean, you're gonna have like a decent amount for sure of ace queen. That will three bet. We mentioned not having ace jack, but we didn't mention not having ace queen. So you'll definitely have that. I mean, you'll have ace queen for three betting pre-flop. You'll have ace queen for mixing bet on the flop. You'll have ace queen for mixing bet on the turn. So you'll definitely just like collide with this queen, and you'll have to make a judgment call about whether or not you should value bet it. But you'll definitely get here with ace queen. I don't think there's too much to debate about that. So that's like the main. Like, I mean, obviously there's aces, right? But as far as your bluff spilling, ace queen is probably the main one, main bluff that's going to fill.
Okay.
But yeah, this is still reasonable. Like I said, it's not totally unreasonable, but you do want to kind of be careful about how much money you're investing, right? Like if we just go back to this part of the tree, you want to be careful about how much we're investing here, because this, like, before this hand starts, you're in a pretty favorable scenario. I mean, you're in second place.
Yeah.
These
Position on chip leader.
This player's fairly short. Yeah, exactly. You're in a good spot. So you could have called here, didn't have to. Three bet's not stupid. Small C bet on the flop could mix. Don't have to barrel this down, but again, it's not the worst.
This
it's
is where
river.
It gets
yeah, and now it's like thin, right? So but this is it's defensible, and we choose this clever size where we avoid basically laying this player an extraordinarily good price with the KO. This is a good idea. You see the same type of idea take place in sit and goes in various formats, or in heavily ICM adjusted scenarios when you're shoving pre-flop. This idea of leaving back 1,000 chips because it has some strategic advantages. Here it changes the odds this player is getting on a call. This is a very clever idea. It's very good. So this is solid. Okay. The only point I would add is that, like, you just make sure that this is balanced, because it's very tempting to give him better odds when you have aces and jam for a jam. And then not give him better odds when you have the bluff. So just make sure that you're doing this with the entire range.
Yeah,
that'd be the only main caveat to this line.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, that's good to hear, because I wasn't sure. I do it a lot. I do it very, but I try to do it very polarized. With my polarized hands, like hands that I'm obviously gonna fold, and hands that are like slam dunk calls. I think that's sort of the easiest way to balance it. Sometimes I'm a little bit afraid when I do it that I alert my opponent of the fact that I could have bluffs in a scenario, if you know what I mean. So that they, like where if I'm just okay, I have a super strong range here, and I don't even think about it. I just go all in because that's what I do in this scenario. But as soon as I may leave 1,000 behind here, he's like, oh, okay. So he's very aware of like bluffing on these runouts as well. So sometimes I feel like there's a psychological negative to doing it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think as long as you trust that you have the ability to balance the range in the scenario, then there's really there shouldn't be very much information given, conceded, right? As long as you're protecting the range, both with value bets and with bluffs when you do this. The issue will really arise if that's not the case. So
okay.
All right. So overall, like a reasonably well played hand. Definitely a lot of things we could have done differently, but if you play this one reasonably well.
Cool.
Awesome.
So that's some really valuable insight from BBC there. I think that I'm constructing my pre-flop ranges a little bit poorly in that spot. King 10 should have been a flat call, and that's kind of what got me in deep waters. Now, the next hand is from a $5,000 buy-in tournament. I played a hand a little bit funky with ace-8 of spades, and I can't wait to see what you guys think and what Jordan thinks about it. You know that if I start streaming on YouTube, what's a huge disadvantage is that I'm going to have to stream without music, so that's a massive disadvantage. I actually reckon that I'm gonna be having a lot of like Formula 1 on as well during my future streams. Wow, great turn. I think I'm just gonna bet it. I think I put a lot of pressure on hands like ace jack. Ace 9. Deny equity, which is always pretty nice, of course. Block 8-9. On equity.
All right, let's jump straight into it. So we open up the cutoff with ace-8 suited, obviously very standard. We get 2 calls. Checks to you in position. So what are you thinking about when you get here?
Okay, so I would be checking here quite often as well, especially because I think that this hand is very resilient. I think over multiple streets because of the 8 in my hand and the spades. I do want to check some ace-x behind, so I might as well, it's very nice to do it with the ones that aren't, nuts or top of my range in terms of ace-x, but they still play very well over multiple streets. So I figured that this one was a nice one to pick. But that this one could be a nice one to pick, but I kind of feel like in high rollers, I'm not in these situations shoving it down people's throats enough to where because I clearly have the nut advantage, right? They both don't have 10s, they both don't have aces. I mean, and they both don't have ace king. Like those are given. Probably both don't have ace queen either. So I think if that's a given, then sometimes I feel like if I check back here and I say, okay, so I don't have any of those hands, now I become sort of the target with the capped range. And I kind of feel like vice versa, if I'm playing against these guys in 5Ks, that they know they have it and they just start pounding me, And I kind of feel like on their side of the coin, I'm always just thinking, oh, here's this crazy fucking guy again, And I'm always sweating it. So I'm trying to, or at least I'm experimenting with going a little bit more towards bet heavy strategies and just like sort of pressure.
Okay, sure. So I have a few things about that. So the first one is the first idea is reasonably accurate in terms of how you're supposed to play. So when you have ace king, 10s, 6s, you're supposed to bet. So in essence, what I'm advocating for is abandoning the checking range. The checking range should be capped. The turn will introduce some new cards which will help to uncap you. Each one of your opponents will have the other opponent to deal with who is still uncapped. So for example, Mararthur on the turn will have to deal with an uncapped drawn dead, and drawn dead will have to deal with an uncapped Mararthur. So that will constrain how big they can bet on the next street, which will help you to realize equity going into the final street, the river, with your medium strength hands, because your opponent can't just like start slamming the turn, because of course they've got this other uncapped, very strong, potentially, opponent left to deal with. So you can check just a medium strength range on the flop without the same consequences that you would experience on the turn in a heads-up pot. So checking the flop with basically just medium strength hands is actually a pretty clever idea. So it's the way that this is supposed to work. So the flop, you should pure bet all of your strength, essentially. You can maybe mix pocket aces to check just because of how strong the blocking effects are of pocket aces, but even pocket aces will be a majority bet on this flop, even with the bad blockers. So you really do want to bet quite often here with the strongest parts of the range. Now, when we're evaluating the medium strength parts of the range, which is kind of where this hand sits, you do see mixing. So these types of hands will both bet and check. With the backdoor flush draw varieties, you'll be more likely to bet. And without the backdoor flush draw varieties, you'll be more likely to check. So the more resilient the hand is, the more it like handles check raises, the more it kind of coordinates with the turn, the more comfortable you are basically investing the money on the flop. The more isolated the hand is, classic example here would be ace two of clubs. If you have ace two of clubs with which like no backdoor straight draws, no backdoor flush draw, just an isolated top pair hand, that's a pretty good hand to check. And then on the final point, when it comes to dealing with aggression from opponents in high limit games, basically they are mathematically constrained by how many value bets they have. So if someone, in your opinion, or if you're in your estimation, is trying to attack you, they only have so many value bets. That's just the way poker works. There's only so many hands you can value bet with. If they're bluffing more than that, you just press call. So if they're going to run you down, you still have medium strength hands. You don't have air. So if they're going to bet the turn and then overbet the river, you just say, okay, like I think you're bluffing too much. I don't think this range has enough value in it. I think you are aware of how weak my range is, and you're applying more pressure than you should be in this scenario. So then you just press call. And that's fine. Yeah. So so that would be the recommendation for how to deal with it, as opposed to like trying to bet with more hands kind of similar to ace two of clubs or something, so that you avoid the problem that they're going to present you with later. You just have to accept the fact that they're going to present you with the problem later. And then the way you deal with that is that if they're imbalanced, you just press call.
Yeah. Okay. Because Because I definitely wouldn't on my whole intro. I definitely wouldn't have added ace deuce of clubs. So that's good to hear, because I figured that this hand has some capabilities that could go either way. Either they're resilient over multiple streets, or they have equity, and I can really start sort of fighting with this hand. Like you said, also versus check raises and stuff, I have very easy calls. Okay, but that's clear. Yeah, you're right. I think it's also one concept there that I really don't think about well enough is the fact that the small blind isn't just going to think, like when a turn is a 9 or whatever, the small blind isn't just going to think like, okay, this pot's mine, GG,
Right.
It's still
big blind can have 7-8, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's still going to be a very tough spot for them as well. Okay, that's a really good takeaway. That's great. Okay,
awesome, nice. Okay, so we did bet, and this is totally fine. I expect this hand to check sometimes, bet sometimes. Again, just to be clear, the strongest hands should always bet. The most medium strength hands, like ace two of clubs, 10-9 of clubs, those hands, in my opinion, should probably close to always check. But this hand's a mix, so I think this is like a reasonable line, totally acceptable. You get called twice, so now we're in, this is a complicated situation once we get past the flop. It checks to you. So what are you thinking about now?
Okay, so now I'm kind of thinking like, I genuinely think that I have all the strength. I block the nuts. I mean, blocking 8-9 is great there. I also think that there's going to be some check raising with 8-9 from on their side for maybe it mixes, so a part of that is gone. I block. So I kind of feel like now this pressure thing comes into mind, right? I have all the nuts. I mean, it's, there's still hands like ace-9, ace-jack out there, other hands with equity. So now I'm just kind of... Now I feel like I get into a gray area because I have a really strong hand that is pretty resilient to see a river. There's, not a whole lot of scare cards in that sense. But there's also a relative chance that I'm losing. But I'm also not sure that if I just bet that ace-9 or ace-jack are going to fold. You know what I mean? So I feel like I'm swimming a little bit between the strategies here, or the theory, the reasoning that I have. So it's a bit hard. I just sort of like decided to pound it just because I was like, okay, two people, I can how do you say that? Leverage. I can leverage their ranges against each other. So I'm just gonna bet.
Okay. So yeah, you said a lot of good things there. And it is somewhat, this is a tricky situation. This is like, there's not really much else to say. This is just tricky. So this is essentially what you would call a merge bet, which can be very difficult to identify, particularly in multi-way pots. And you kind of got there, like you're using this like in between language and things like that, which kind of describes it. But a merge for people that are watching, and a lot of people don't understand what a merge is, but in this context. But what we're trying to do when we're merging is we're trying to basically, it's weird. You're trying to fold out hands that beat yours, which would be bluffing. But you're trying to get called by hands that you beat, which would be value betting.
Mm.
And you're doing both when you make this play. And that can be very complicated to identify for people. So this play is acceptable because it works, in my opinion, as a merge. It has all the characteristics that would justify a merge, and I'll explain that in just a second. But it's very difficult to identify that this can be a bet, and checking this is also very reasonable. So you could have checked. There's no wrong answer here. The wrong answer is probably betting 2,500 because your bet should be fairly polarized. So you should probably be betting half pot plus, but your opponents can both have the nuts. I believe the small blind and big blind could both have 9-8, like suited for the small blind, obviously offsuited for the big blind. And as a result of that, the big blind could have hands like 7-6, ace-10, ace-7, small blind potential, maybe not ace-10 for the big blind, but ace-7 for sure, 6-7 for sure. So they both are at least relatively uncapped. As a result, I would hate overbetting. Okay, so there are certain answers that are not good. So we can. It's difficult to say like what exactly the right play is, but we can define what the wrong play is. Overbetting would be the wrong play. Betting 2,500 would be the wrong play because you shouldn't be value betting that thinly. The right play is something between like 5,500 or like roughly 55% and pot. Anything within that range is probably going to be acceptable with this hand as well as checking. So again, difficult to define the exact right answer. Much easier to define what the wrong answer would look like.
Okay.
Now in this play, when I define it as a merge, to clarify what I mean is if you're the small blind and Lex is value betting here, and you have ace jack in the small blind, Lex is not value betting here with like ace 9 of clubs. Okay, so when Lex is value betting, he's going to have I understand we have ace eight of spades, but primarily we're going to have straights, two pair, potentially ace king, but even ace king is a majority check in my opinion on this card. So the value betting range here is fairly narrow, and ace jack is just a pure bluff catcher.
Mm-hmm.
The issue with that is that the big blind also has combos kind of like ace jack, and so the small blind doesn't really want to call too much with pure bluff catchers, knowing that the big blind could also be uncapped 8-9, 6-7, ace-7, etc. So the small blind will fold hands like ace jack. The small blind will fold hands like ace 9, but the small blind will not fold hands like king 10 of spades, jack 10 of spades, 10 9 of spades, queen jack of spades. Even hands like jack 9 of spades, etc. So you get called by a lot of combo draws that are dead, or pair plus flush draws that are dead, and you actually fold out a lot of the hands that beat you. So in that context, this hand is a merge. You're folding out hands that beat you, and you're getting called by hands that you dominate. So the way that you can manipulate the equity with this bet is very clever, which makes it good. Now you can also mix to check in this scenario, as mentioned, but betting is actually quite clever.
Okay.
Given the variables I just talked about. So you bet, this player folds, we get called. Whoever's the king of diamonds, what are you thinking?
I just kind of feel like now, like the eight of spades, regardless if it blocks the nuts or not, or the second nuts, but I kind of feel like it's an important blocker to their air as well. I still think they have all the two pairs. They're not going to check raise 10-6, 6-7, a7, all that stuff. So having had a merge bet on the turn, I feel like if I bet now, they just fold all the stuff that I was dominating, and they call with all the stuff that I lost to. So I feel like there's no point in betting anymore, and I just check.
Yeah, I would agree with that. How would you bluff in this scenario?
Probably something with a 10 or a 7 in my hand or something.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you're gonna have to, as long as you understand that you're gonna have to be bluffing more likely with pairs in some capacity. You're not gonna have enough high card hands to just use high card bluffs on the river. So you're gonna have to find some pairs. This one's not the pair you would want to use, I don't think. So yeah, if you barreled the turn with like 10-9 of spades or something, or even if you just went off with like 10-9 of clubs, that would be reasonable. Following through on this river with some amount of king X is probably reasonable. It's not that clear. You could have like 7-8 suited specifically, but that's kind of it. You'd have 7-8 with diamonds and hearts, probably. for bluffing over with. But yeah, you're gonna have to just get comfortable with the idea that you're gonna have to bluff here with some amount of pairs.
Yeah.
But again, this one being what it is, top pair, probably not the way that you want to go for bluffing. So I like to check. Unfortunately, we ran into this is a very poor, I would say, flop overcall. If we go back here, when we bet here, and then this player calls, this hand is dead. So this hand just needs to fold.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Yeah. But yeah, you played the hand reasonably well. I actually really like it. It's a really, really solidly played hand. So nice job.
Awesome. Thanks. Again, some really valuable insight from BBZ there. I think it's really nice to hear that my thinking was sound. I tried something new. I was experimenting a little bit. I definitely would have gone more towards checking that hand, but it's really good to hear that I picked the right situation with the exact right hand combo for it. It's really nice as a sort of support system for future $5,000 tournaments as well, because those situations get so marginal and people are so insanely good. If you also want to learn more about poker coaching, and if you want to take that first step to learn more about strategy, BBZ platform has everything you need to have free videos, $10 videos, bundles that are categorized by subject and game types, and you can pretty much find anything you need there. All the links are going to be found in my description below, and it's never too late to start studying. So good luck and see you next time.